the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Please silence phones, pagers, etc. Round one, citizen concerns. If you have anything that you would like to talk about that is not already on the agenda, you may approach the podium and have 3 minutes to speak. Seeing no one interested, I will move approval of today's agenda.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Items 3 through 5 are consent agenda items, and they constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items passed unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3 is approval of the minutes of the June 29 meeting. 4 is approval of claims. 5, human resources. A, approval of memorandum of personnel transaction. And B, approval of purchase for the cyber liability insurance policy for FY 2021.
Move it. Second.
Motion by Monson, second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Board Administration, item 6A is approval of appropriation resolution for FY 2022. Dennis.
Okay, the first one is a resolution for appropriations. This gives us authority for the board and the county to issue checks for this fiscal year 22, and it lists every department division in the county that's under the board's control. So all this needs is approval of this resolution, and we spend money.
I'll move it. Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Monson to approve appropriation resolution. Any other questions for Dennis? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Do we need to sign that?
Passes 5-0.
Yes. Then you sign it as you go through the meeting if you prefer. You have, do they have the copy to sign? Very good. That's all you gotta do.
Item B, approval of resolutions for interfunding operating transfers for FY 2022.
Okay, we'll go through these kind of quickly. There's 12 of them. The first one is for general sup. The general basic covers our fringe benefits. It's paid out general basic. We levy the tax out general sup for a total of $6,676,466.
Move it. Second.
Motion by Monson, second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next one is rural basic services to the county library fund. This is covering a township's share that we levy for the county library. Amounts to $168,391.
I'll move it.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next one is rural basic services, the secondary road fund. This is where we levy taxes and rural basic for secondary road services. That amounts to $1,610,000.
I'll move it.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next one, the gaming revenues to general basic fund. This is for tax reduction, property tax reductions, amount of $300,000.
I'll move it. Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Monson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next one's local office sales tax, rural basic fund. This covers the economic development department expenses for fiscal year 22. That amounts to $284,541.
I'll move it.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next one's local office sales tax, rural basic fund. This is to cover the expenses for the soil conservation that we share with soil conservation for $39,000.
I'll move it.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next one is Ems Loan Fund to debt services, a 2-year program where we're going to transfer $100,000 To reduce the tax asking debt service, this is where we discontinued loans for ambulances. This is what this amount is for.
I'll move that.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
The next one is gaming revenues to debt service for the amount of $50,000 to reduce tax askings.
I'll move it.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
This also is a 2-year program, this year and the next fiscal year.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, General Basic Fund to Emergency Paramedic Services, this is the county-wide levy for paramedic services, the amount of $128,652.
I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Next one's Rural Basic Services to Emergency Paramedic Services, same dollar amount, this is what we levy on the townships, $128,652.
I will move that.
Second.
Second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next one is the Tax Increment Fund to Debt Service Fund. This is to cover our GO bond issue for Dogwood Trail, AGP that. This amounts to $398,256, and I believe we have one more year of this.
So we'll move that.
Bring it back, Rob.
We need a second.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye. You guys gonna vote?
I'll say aye. Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
Last one, Secondary Roads, the General Basic Fund. This is the last payment from Secondary Roads Fund for the loan we actually did for the Breezy Farm. That amounts to $100,000, and that is done this fiscal year.
I'll move it.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Item 7, County Auditor, approval to select and approve a proposal to provide electronic poll books for Woodbury County.
What before you is the agreement. We had 3 entities that replied to RFP. 2 of them are 2 that we considered. One was the Iowa Precinct Atlas Consortium. We didn't consider that because it was just using the same old laptops without any interconnectivity. The 2, we had demonstrations by 10X and No Inc., and we decided to go with 10X because the staff felt that they were better suited for the users, the precinct election officials that were going to use them. The prices were virtually identical, just depending on how we put together what we needed for Woodbury County. In the meantime, Joshua was tied up for a long period of time dealing with law enforcement center, but he's reviewing the contract, and he has been talking with them recently. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is to approve this, going with 10X, subject to positive review by the county attorney's office.
How much longer do you anticipate that to take, Mr. Widman?
Well, it has been reviewed, and we've requested changes. They've agreed to most of them. There's some language related to liability that we haven't come to an agreement on. I just had a conference call this afternoon with them, and we're supposed to exchange some more language tomorrow morning. So I guess it'll just be a matter of ironing those things out and finding the right compromise. If they were to insist upon the language as initially proposed, then I would not recommend approval. But they have indicated a willingness to find a compromise. We just haven't got there yet.
So this vote is tentative. You're being satisfied, or your office being satisfied with the contract?
That's my understanding of what Pat is asking for.
I'll move that. Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Monson. Is this coming from your budget or CIP or?
CIP.
Okay.
And this does leave money for Pat to get the Wi-Fi hotspots. He's gonna need some money for that, so there's money there to cover that.
And that will not be a large amount to do the Wi-Fi hotspots.
Any other questions for the auditor or Mr. Butler? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Secondary road, where did Mark, oh, there's
Marks and names.
Mark's mini-me.
Colin Ryan, Secondary Roads. Item A, we're asking for consideration of approval of a drainage district tax levy for Poverty Hollow. It's an inter-county drainage district, and there's some unpaid warrants that need to be satisfied. It has not been levied since 2006. It's not been managed like some of the other inter-county districts. The warrants have been accumulating with no levy, so we're proposing a levy to satisfy these outstanding warrants. In future years, we're looking at a joint resolution for a tax levy that to be passed, and then it will be managed like the other inter-county drainage districts. The levy's been calculated based on formulas that were approved at the adoption of the drainage district. It amounts to $450 levied against all the tracts of land, lots, railroad companies, and public highways within said drainage district.
Move it.
Motion by Monson, second by DeWitt. Any other questions for the county engineer's office?
What were the outstanding warrants?
Those I'm not personally familiar with.
Okay.
Probably due to maintenance, cleaning, new pipes, things like that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Approval of quitclaim deed for right-of-way for J. Culver.
So there are 5 properties. They're all along the Morningside Second Edition. There was a public hearing on April 20th to consider vacating these 5 different sites. The board vacated on May 4th, and we have prepared quitclaim deeds for these right-of-way portions as requested by those landowners who spoke at the hearing. This first one is for Culver.
I'll move it.
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt. And every deed holder down there is happy with this. There's been no, I did talk to Mark briefly about it, and it seems like one of the deed holders recently, but it sounded like everything came together.
Nothing has been brought to my attention.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
That was a long time coming, by the way.
Passes 5-0. Approval of quitclaim deed for right-of-way for Sensible Properties LLC.
It's the same,
I'll move it.
same story.
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Approval of quitclaim deed for right-of-way for DNL Blute.
Again, in that morning.
I will move that.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Monson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Approval of quitclaim deed for right-of-way for R. Munhoven and L. Kowalski.
Move it.
Second by DeWitt. First by Monson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. And approval of a quitclaim deed for right-of-way for D. Ludwig. I will move that.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Is there anything I need to be signing tonight? Okay. Just leave them up here and I'll get to them as we, oh, up here, please. Thank you. We are at our 4:45 set time for community and economic development. Item 9A is public hearing on commercial wind energy conversion systems ordinance. Mr. Gleiser.
Excuse me, thank you, David Gleiser, Community Economic Development Director. I'm going to start by handing out some packets of information to the board. It's going to help you follow the PowerPoint. in the quickest manner possible.
Joshua, there's one for you and there's one for Pat.
And if the members of the audience or the public would like to see, there's copies at the podium up there. Let's go ahead and hop right into it. All right, so I'm just going to go. I want basically the public and the board to acknowledge the suggested revisions and the amendments that have been approved to date. And so basically this copy in front of you, it's going to have highlighted in color revisions that have already been approved by the board, and then there are also going to be suggested recommendations that have not been approved. On page 1, you can see in the whereas section, we amended that on 6/22, included some language for the Loess Hills. In section 1, we're recommending just some cleanup language to add clarity, small revisions. We change out CWIC's permit and incorporate throughout the document CWIC's special use permit. That's reflected throughout the document. On page 2, what's highlighted there is that we added a couple of definitions to help add clarity and differentiate the special use permit versus the building permit. And so we added definitions for the special use permit. We added definitions for the building permit. We made some revisions to the applicant definition, and then we made some and then we incorporated a new definition on communication antenna because it brings clarity to a requirement in sections 5C and 7C. On page 3, basically it's some cleanup language and just some basic housekeeping. We did add a couple of new definitions, development plan and final development plan. We added those definitions to help differentiate those two required documents as part of the special use permit application process and as well as the building permit process. We added some we increased some language in the feeder line definition to add some protections to public rights-of-way and private land easements. And on 6/29, the board approved the definition for the Loess Hills. Occupied residence, we recommend revising just to provide a little bit more clarity in terms of what is a regular basis. And then the other two revisions are just for simple clarity purposes. On the next page, on page 4, we're going to see a small revision to the public conservation area definition. It was a legal suggestion that we add that Iowa code reference. On the substation, we just added a little bit to that, and that we're saying that substations for these projects shall be located entirely outside of the road right-of-way. So we wanted to increase that protection. On page 5, we're recommending bullet 1 under section 4. We just simply deleted a little bit of language because they were already requirements in another section. So it was a little bit premature and semi-redundant. So we struck that language because it's required somewhere else. And we deleted, or recommending to delete, the requirement of requiring applicants to provide the W-9s and the EINs. We actually have no real purpose for those, and they're not typically required by other jurisdictions. I think it's something that we saw in another ordinance that we initially borrowed. So I don't believe that's necessary. And what we also did is made a simplification to item B on page 5. We just make any applicant provide a certified abstractors list of all the property owners within 5,280 feet of any turbine in the project. And we require a development plan as part of the special use permit application and approval process. We change photographs to images, in the 21st century with wording. And on page 6, again, just some very minor clarification, cleanup, sentence structure kinds of changes. The big one is on item G on page 6. We had initially proposed the application fee be $1,000 per turbine. We believe that it is a more fair process to the developer that they pay a one-time $1,000 application fee per project for the special use permit that the Board of Supervisors would review and approve. If they're approved, then they want to come back for a building permit. The building permit is structured to be $750 per turbine at a later date. And on page 7, there are no revisions. On page 8, besides the simple sentences or revisions to the sentences to add clarity, item 7 was an entirely new subsection that we added into that process. We incorporate all of the requirements of the application materials for the special use permit as part of the same requirements that an applicant would have to bring for a building permit. And what I'm trying to explain to you folks is that if I'm a developer, I come to the Board of Supervisors, we hold a public hearing, and if you approve my application for the special use permit, I pay the county the $1,000, and I basically have 2 years to come back and get my building permit filled out and applied for. At that point, the building permit is going to be $750 per turbine, and we require all of the same documents that you required, and we want to verify that nothing has changed. We do have a small provision on page 10 where we do acknowledge the need for modifications to the final development plan. And here, we're just saying that once the supervisors have approved you for the use and you submit your final development plan to the Community Economic Development Department, we will review that and permit that and approve it administratively like we would any other building permit. So it's really the same concept of if somebody came to the Board of Adjustment for a conditional use permit and they approved it, later on down the road, those folks would probably come back and get their building permit from my office, and we would make sure that it meets the setbacks and the zoning, the regulations and et cetera. And so essentially, that's how it works. On page 10, you can see that we did add the 1,250 feet setback distance to the occupied residence. So we increased that. We also did add the setback distance for that landform area. And on page 11, we added a couple of different subsections, C, D, and E. And basically, C was a subsection to help better define what the Luss Hills area and boundary is and where that data can be found. Public conservation areas, we add a little bit more of a definition and tie that into Iowa code. We also talk about recorded conservation easements, and we also tell developers where all of those private conservation easements can be obtained and viewed. And so those are some of the requirements. I mean, if we're going to tell developers that you have to protect these certain areas, we've got to have a publicly accessible repository where they can go and acquire that information. And so we've worked and identified that as being the local NRCS office. And then what we also did is we are recommending that we separate the setback distances for these turbines and the substations. Initially, they were blended in together, and it does not make sense that a substation for one of these projects have a 1,250 setback distance when a regular utility substation can basically be,
Right on the highway.
pretty much. And so we wanted to make that differentiation. We did give it a 10-foot setback and said that it cannot be located entirely in the road right-of-way. So,
And you have in here everything that Mark Nara was concerned about in terms of
yes.
travel.
Mark's biggest concerns are addressed in Section 8 in the ancillary agreements and procedures. We made no changes to those sections. Really, the last revisions on page 15, we just cited the Iowa code, and that's pretty much it. It would be my it would be the recommendation of I feel that the work group, that the board consider all the revisions that we propose today as commonsensical and, logical, kind of practical how-to revisions and changes. I feel that based on, discussions with members of my zoning commission, members of the public, and, from public testimony that we've had at previous public hearings, that there is concern or issue with this particular ordinance and the Luss Hills. My final recommendation to the board is that this is better than what currently exists in the zoning ordinance. I do feel that it's very comprehensive and gives us the protections that we need in order to do these projects the right way and protect public and private property. I would let the board or let the public weigh in on their public comments and let them provide their public testimony to you. But at the end of the day, ultimately, I would say that the board should consider two options, either adopting this commercial wind energy conversion systems ordinance as a standalone ordinance with all of the board-approved amendments and suggested revisions as of today, or that the board should adopt the ordinance as suggested with minus the language referring to the Luss Hills. I say that as a way to broker some sort of negotiation or consensus between the groups. I would honestly say that I don't believe that the soil type is suitable for a large-scale commercial wind turbine pad to be on. I believe that there is greater wind potential elsewhere in the county that developers would prospect other than the Luss Hills. And I think that as a special use standalone ordinance with the Board of Supervisors being the decision makers that hold that authority, I think that you would also still have the discretion to consider that as one of your factors in your decision-making process. And so I will close my recommendations or what I have to say if the board doesn't have any other questions for me at this time. But that would basically be kind of my recommendation at this point. And if there's anyone else, Joshua or Mark Nara or Dan Priestley, others in the work group that would like to chime in, I'd be more than happy to let them entertain you as well.
Okay, does anybody else has questions for Mr. Glazer?
Which sections will be subject to change if we leave out Luss Hills language?
It would be, you would lose.
Just so we can direct everyone's attention to those.
Okay, sure. It would be in your packet. It would be the ordinance that says in your top right-hand corner in the box, CWEX ordinance with all staff recommended revisions as of July 6, 21, and no Luss Hills language. It removes it from the whereas section. It removes it from the definition section. It removes it from our setback section, and it also removes it from the setback waiver section. I offer that compromise basically because I feel like it's been the biggest issue that we've been dealing with since we've been holding these public hearings and having these conversations. And I don't want to dismiss the feelings or the sentiments of the conservation community, nor do I want to dismiss any private landowners' feelings or sentiments. And so I've collected as much information that I think that the board needs, and I would happily let you make the call.
I wasn't able to see it over the phone last week, but I think you showed a map of the Loess Hills according to the 2002 assessment. Is that something that we could pull up again as a visual?
I don't have it on me, but I could, that's something that I can get fairly easily. And I would say, though, that Supervisor Ung, that it hypothetically takes out about a third of the land mass of Woodbury County. The Loess Hills land formation, the shape file that we've received is one that was derived in the early 70s. It was part of a national park, I'm sorry, in the early 2000s, it was a part of a national park study in 2002. I'm not sure if that has been updated since. But, you know, when I think of the Loess Hills, I think of the bluffs.
The hills.
The hills. I don't necessarily think of the tapering backside into the prairie, into the farmland. And I know that much of the farmland in the valley, or, you know, at ground level has been tilled or is being tilled under conventional farming practices. And so at some level there's debate, or I think it's commonsensical to have a discussion or a debate on the boundary of the Loess Hills on the eastern side. And you know, I was told by members of the conservation community that there are other things that are a part of that ecosystem that live in other parts of that shape file. So birds have migratory patterns, and there's other animals that live in this habitat that, so it's more than just that. That's why that shape file is so large. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm a geologist or, you know, any kind of that's not my expertise, but I was provided with the shape file, and I was told that everybody, the federal government, the state of Iowa, and everyone in the conservation community recognizes it as the Loess Hills. I did try to come up with a descriptive boundary using road right-of-way, and I was basically going to try to say, take D38 up to, you know, and whatever, and it just wasn't working out, and so, you know, I throw it out there.
Well, if you could find that map with that 1250 on the red, and just get that, I don't know if you can get it to Karen to get it up on the screen again, just so we have what all that boundary was. One thing that would be missing from that map, though, and Grady made me think about it just because he was on the airport board, is that, you know, with an airport, you also have like height distances for so much area around an airport. So a lot of that, you know, southwest portion of Woodbury County would probably be eliminated too, just from proximity from the airport.
Oh, yeah.
Well, do you think you could run up and get that map? And, yes. And if it works, fine. If it doesn't, we'll make the best we can without it. But since we're in a public hearing, if nobody else has any other questions for Mr. Gleiser, we'll start with public input.
Okay, thank you. I'll be right back. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
All right, I don't know where everybody sits. I got a fair idea on a couple folks, but if you'd like to come up, please limit your comments to 3 minutes, if at all possible, and we'll get started on the public hearing side of it. Yes, ma'am. Can you tell us your name and address and start there?
My name's Lucy Cameron. I live in rural Danbury.
Rural where?
Danbury.
Okay.
Outside of Danbury. I'd just like to read through my thoughts, and maybe if there's feedback, receive it at the end. So regarding the proposed ordinance, I wondered why Mr. Gleiser sought to change the decision-making process from the Zoning Commission and the Board of Adjustment to the Board of Supervisors. Surely the ordinance could simply include his points regarding turbine setbacks, recourse for damages to secondary roads, decommissioning turbines, and application fees without changing the decision-making process. Unique to the Zoning Commission and the Board of Adjustment is that at least 3 of the 5 members of each body must reside in unincorporated Woodbury County. According to the proposed ordinance, any commercial wind turbine project would be constructed in unincorporated Woodbury County. I wondered if any of you at the Board of Supervisors who live in unincorporated Woodbury County would raise your hands. And Mr. Gleiser's not here, but I want to ask him if he lives in unincorporated Woodbury County. Switching the decision-making power from bodies that represent unincorporated Woodbury County residents to the Board of Supervisors will not give unincorporated Woodbury County residents an adequate voice on the issue of commercial wind turbines, amongst which they will bear the burden of living and working. I'm concerned that Chairperson DeWitt's former association with Mid-American Energy and a union that works with Mid-American Energy could potentially represent a conflict of interests with respect to evaluating commercial wind projects proposed by Mid-American Energy. I'm concerned that through this ordinance, asking the Board of Supervisors to vote to give themselves decision-making powers that currently reside with the Zoning Commission and the Board of Adjustments is a conflict of interest. What government entities ever turn away further acquisition of power? Mr. Gleiser has mentioned contacting stakeholders representing the electric, utility, and renewable energy industry and members of the conservation community. Residents of unincorporated Woodbury County are stakeholders, as they would be the ones living amongst any wind turbine projects. What efforts did Mr. Gleiser make to understand the sentiment of his constituents that live in unincorporated Woodbury County prior to his presentation of this ordinance to the Board of Supervisors? The county development plan states that agriculture is the principal land use in Woodbury County. Requiring removal of concrete to 4 feet below the soil surface is insufficient. A wind turbine's foundation extends 15 to 20 feet below the soil surface and consists of 750 cubic yards of concrete, which is about 60 truckloads. We can realistically anticipate that this concrete and its associated rebar will never be removed. That means existing fertile farmland will be converted into dead zones for future farmers. Let's not forget the roads that are constructed through fields to reach the turbines from secondary roads. Leaving this quantity of concrete in the soil, plus the gravel from the roads through fields, directly contradicts Woodbury County's development plan's assertion that agriculture is the principal land use in Woodbury County. Agricultural land use means people who currently enjoy scenic beauty, quiet, and wildlife. Commercial wind turbines detract from unincorporated Woodbury County's inherent beauty and quiet. Commercial wind turbines and their construction and maintenance undermine Woodbury County's development plan's directive that agriculture is its principal land use by degrading the agrarian way of life of unincorporated Woodbury County residents. In Gage County, Nebraska, south of Lincoln, turbine setbacks were set to 1 mile for non-participating residences. Their board is also asking their Planning and Zoning Committee to look into issues of wind turbine noise limits and making setbacks based on property line rather than residence. Going by property line rather than residence is preferable, else a landowner might not make future improvements on their own land if it puts those improvements between their current residence and the property line if it means they will be closer to a commercial wind turbine. House Bill 401 in Ohio requires wind farms of 5 megawatts or larger to be sited on the larger of 2 measurements, 1,125 feet from property line, or the manufacturer's safety specifications. The bill lets permits for new and upgraded wind farms go before a local vote. Kansas is evaluating legislation that requires wind turbines to be at least 1 mile from property lines of neighboring landowners and sometimes farther. Finally, I recommend that members of the Board of Supervisors vote against the Commercial Wind Energy Conversion Systems Ordinance. More research needs to be done to understand the impetus behind the proposed change in the decision-making process. Residents of unincorporated Woodbury County must have sufficient representation on any decision-making body, as they are the people who will bear the burden of living and working among the commercial wind turbines and their construction and maintenance. I recommend that Woodbury County require a setback of at least 2,500 feet from property lines, as well as municipalities. I recommend that Woodbury County require complete removal of in-ground concrete and rebar from wind turbines upon decommission. These recommendations ensure that residents of unincorporated Woodbury County receive adequate representation from any decision-making body. They also ensure that the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors adheres to Woodbury County Development Plan's land use goal to minimize conflict with agriculture, which is the principal land use in Woodbury County.
You raised a point that I hadn't given any thought. I do have a history with Mid-American Energy, but I do not own any stock. I have absolutely nothing to do other than paying my bill at the moment. And as to the question of who lives out in an unincorporated area, I do still have land that I intend to build on in the future, and that is on REC. Not that it matters, but I do have land out in an unincorporated area that I'm anxious to get building on soon. Thank you for your input. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Ms. Cameron? Anybody else?
I'm Chris Sommerzant, Woodbury County Zoning Commission. I'm the chair, and I've been asked to read language from the Zoning Commission and also from the Board of Adjustment from one of its members. It says C, WECS ordinance number, which we don't know yet, Commercial Wind Energy Conversion Systems Ordinance, an ordinance regulating commercial wind energy conversion systems in unincorporated Woodbury County. On June 29, 2021, the Board of Supervisors, during the second reading, amended the ordinance language to include various Los Hills language and verbiage referencing the mapping of the Les Hills landform area to the county's GIS website to include a 1-mile setback. As a result of the Les Hills language being inserted after our review, the members of the Woodbury County Zoning Commission hereby rescind our support of this ordinance. Signed today, July 7th, 2021, and I have each member's signature. Okay. Board of Adjustment also asked me to read, it's basically the same language, but Board of Adjustment, they're also rescinding their support of this ordinance as the language was inserted after the fact. Would you like me to read the ordinance, the whole thing again for the record? It's word for word, except Board of Adjustment. Not necessary? Okay. And that one's signed by Pamela Clark. She wanted to be included on that one. The other Board of Adjustment members, Tom Thiessen said he would be here at the meeting. I'm not sure if he's here or not. Bob Roulette texted me on his way here, said he just got off work. He won't make it here tonight. And Daniel Har, we thought was going to be here tonight, but I'm not sure if he's here or not. So they also asked me to read another item for the record. It says, basically, I approve the original standalone commercial wind farm ordinance giving the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors authority to approve or deny any and all commercial wind farm applications with public participation throughout the county. I oppose the amended standalone commercial wind farm ordinance for the following reasons. Unnecessary inclusion of the Les Hills, referencing to GIS mapping and 1-mile buffer strip language. Discriminates against all property owners within the targeted Les Hills area, removing the right to public participation. Alludes that property owners within the Les Hills landform are incapable of good stewardship. And unnecessarily initiates a governmental regulatory taking without compensation in all Los Hills property owners' private property rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights and the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. I appeal to the Woodbury County Supervisors to remove all references to the Los Hills, GIS mapping, and 1-mile buffer strip, eliminating discrimination, govern all county property owners with equality, and protect all county property owners' constitutional private property rights.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairperson,
Sir.
could you entertain a motion to receive the documents?
I will move to receive the documents. Motion by Duet, second by Ung, to receive documents from Chris Sand.
Those are just letters that came from these folks.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Rocky, real quick on this. Is that document something that the zoning commission created as a result of a public meeting?
Yes.
And when was that public meeting held?
On the 29th. Was that last Tuesday, 29th? When you amended and approved the motion for the Les Hills language?
Okay.
Mr. Gleiser?
Was the question, Joshua, did the zoning commission public meeting and
What I'm asking is, this document that's presented today as a position of the zoning commission, was that created at a public meeting?
may I see it?
Okay. I mean, I don't think, unless there was an open meetings violation, I don't think there's a possibility of having an official position from the zoning commission
Yes.
absent something that was created in a public meeting of the zoning commission. So they have a right to comment individually, but it wouldn't be proper for it to be a official position of the zoning commission.
Yes, this was not on the public agenda, nor was it discussed.
So what does that do to your,
Well, the board can still receive it. I just think for the purposes of the record, it would be those individuals individually as opposed to
An official action.
an action of the zoning commission.
is that okay with?
And the same with Board of Adjustments?
Okay. Why don't we do it this way? I guess we've got two ordinances here. One, what we're calling, keep me in check here, Mr. Woodman and Mr. Glazer. One is a standalone that does not include Les Hills language. And I will ask for those to speak on the standalone. Can I do that?
I think the public hearing should be an opportunity for anyone to speak, whatever comments they would like to, and we shouldn't ask them to designate particular allegiances. It's just a time that anyone can speak their 3 minutes.
Asking for anyone else to speak on for 3 minutes. Mr. Bride, I know you were there once.
Tom Bride, 1505 Buchanan Avenue, Sioux City, Iowa. And I guess to clarify, I am a current board president of Woodbury County Farm Bureau, but I'm not here in any capacity to represent the board or their members. I'm here as an individual landowner and as a member of the zoning commission. The statement that was presented was drafted. I personally do not want to be associated or have the referral that I gave to approve that amendment with the Los Hills language, because that was after I saw the document. Los Hills language was added after that. I guess I'd like to point out right now, currently the zoning commission would review any applications for a commercial wind farm. They're eligible to apply to go to any district in ag preservation or general industrial. It would go through the zoning board. We would make a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment, and then the Board of Adjustment has the right to review and either approve or deny that. We have guidelines that we have to follow. Part of those guidelines are to make sure that it's compatible and suitable for the area, and that's a breakdown of everything, not just the location that it's in. We would look at the Los Hills as a recommendation, whether it's suitable in that area or not. I'm not here to argue whether commercial wind farms should go in the Los Hills or they shouldn't. I'm not here to argue against or for this ordinance. I'm here basically against the issue with property rights. By accepting this ordinance with the Los Hills language, you've created two areas in Woodbury County, basically the Los Hills area and the non-Los Hills area. And a right that's currently given is taken away from that Los Hills area. So, like I said, currently we have the ability to control whether they do or don't go in those areas, and we would look at that. And as my personal opinion, I don't know that I would argue to place one in the Los Hills area. And as the Board of Supervisors, if you adopt this standalone ordinance without the Los Hills language, you will have full control to either approve or deny any any commercial wind farm anywhere in Woodbury County. Is that a correct statement, Joshua? without the Lowe's Hills language, they still would have the ability to approve or deny based on information that comes before them. They would
Right.
still have the right to either approve or deny.
Yeah, it would be subject to the other setback requirements in the ordinance, but,
And other conditions that they feel are relevant or public input. So I guess what I'm getting at is removing the language doesn't diminish your ability to regulate where they should or shouldn't go. David's comment about there's not really a good suitable location for them anyhow based on wind maps and just the topography and the soil types. So we're arguing a point that really doesn't need to be argued because you still have that ability to control it without taking away property rights. And like I said, everyone I've talked to in the last week, I would say the overwhelming majority does not want wind turbines anywhere in Woodbury County. They don't like them, period. I'd say it's 95% or more. But not one single individual that I spoke with is in favor of taking away a right from a specific land area. So even if they hate wind turbines, they don't want that right removed from that property owner because they're in a specific land area. And to give you an example, that's about 200,000 acres, 320, 25 sections of ground that's encompassed in that. I mean, it's a large area, and I don't care if it's that size or if it's 2,000 acres. Discriminating against a specific landowner in a certain area when he's zoned identically to a different landowner isn't the reason to say no. There's reasons to say no, but not because of that. Thank you.
Question, what rights do you lose?
Currently, we have the right, under the current zoning, through a conditional use permit, to apply for the application for a commercial wind farm.
No, you said you lose rights by having the Lowe's Hills designation.
You eliminate that right to even apply for that permit with the Lowe's Hills language in the Lowe's Hills area. If it's adopted with that language, flat out, you don't even have the right to ever place a commercial wind farm in that area. That's the difference.
Why wouldn't you want that?
I'm not saying I don't want that, but I want that choice, and I want the supervisors to review that. That goes from Sioux City to Mobile, and then it's a ban down through the county. I'm not saying they should go in there, but I'm not gonna argue that there might not be a spot, maybe over by Mobile, that something would work. I'm just saying that to broadly, with the stroke of a pen, take away the right to a third of the land held by private ownership in Woodbury County isn't the right thing to do, and that's what people are upset about. They'll argue, I don't want it out there. I don't want it near me. But just don't stroke the pen and take away that right. That's the argument that I've heard from 100% of everybody I've talked to, even if they hate wind turbines. They still don't want that decision made in that manner. And the next step, I guess I'd go on to say, is if you guys adopt this language, a future board could amend it to take it back out. It's not in there in stone. It doesn't offer protection forever. And like I said, I am for preserving the Lowe's Hills. I do what I can as a farmer. I no-till. I don't like disturbing soil where I don't have to. So I'm not arguing either for or against the rights of the Lowe's Hills, wind turbines, anything. I'm just pointing out one provision that was added that does take away rights. That's my personal belief.
Okay.
Any other questions?
The gentleman from Mid-American had his fingers up to speak as well. Would you come up here, because I actually have a couple of questions for you when you finish with yours.
Matt Ott, Mid-American Energy, 4299 Northwest Urbandale in Urbandale, Iowa. The reason I held my finger, I just had some aerial maps that overlay. This is from, I believe it's the same shapefile that's being used. But kind of as David was saying, I was surprised to see the amount of land that it takes up, as well as the land that it encompasses. Not knowing, about this area, I assumed it was bluffs, prairie ground, wooded areas, things of that. It's quite a bit of farmable, tillable acres that are under move crop. So more just to point that out, I don't know if a setback is needed. Maybe there's something there where it's, I'm not here to argue it similarly if wind turbines should go in there or not. At the very least, I don't know if a setback does anything, especially because most of those acres are, row crop right now.
Okay, one second.
Yeah.
Do we need to move to receive these maps as they are different or close to what's already on? I move to receive these maps as informational items.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Monson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you. I'm going to sit here and tell you, and I might step on toes, but I am not in favor of wind farms. That's it, okay? That is not going to necessarily change because I know that wind farms are here. There's little to nothing that we can do other than work on the setbacks and such. To Ms. Cameron's comment about, let's say 12 years down the road, something happens, the power company does not want to maintain or run that wind turbine anymore. Is there anything in there in the contract language that you're aware of that would mandate that that pylon be taken out from underground? Is that negotiable with the landowner?
Yeah, so I can speak to Mid-American's easements, obviously. There are other developers throughout Iowa that develop projects that we buy from. I would say that is very common, if not in every easement.
What part is common?
Decommissioning, a removal of facilities from
But does that include removing the anchor, the pylon that's
the
underground?
foundation.
Yeah.
So typically, that's to a depth of 4 feet. I mean, that can always be negotiated. These aren't being put upon landowners. These are all voluntary easements that we sign with landowners. We're asking them if they want the opportunity to have it on their land. Here is the easement, here are the terms. If you're like them, go ahead and sign up. We're not forcing it. So we do allow the landowner to kind of decide what he or she thinks is best for their property.
Okay, I'm kind of a coal-fired power plant guy myself, because 22 and a half years there, and I said it, so there it is. But do you have anything else for the board?
Well, and just on that, additionally, I believe the ordinance as the board is considering includes a decommissioning requirement as well, with some financial security. So above and beyond what's in our agreements, there is kind of a belt and suspenders, if you will.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for this?
All right.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak on the top? Ma'am, can you come up here, please? Give us your name and address.
My name is Marcella Broyhill. I'm from Dakota County, your neighbor across the river. And Woodbury County and Dakota County have always been good neighbors. We have just addressed this issue in Dakota County. And I was surprised to see that your setback was so slim. We have we have just set in a 2-mile setback from an occupied home and a 2-mile setback from recreational areas. Because we just now have the Danish Alps out there, so we do not want to encumber that with wind turbines. And these are industrial wind complexes. They are not wind farms. They will devalue the land that they are put upon. We also have a decommissioning of 8 feet below the ground, and there are some other stipulations of the timing of the decommissioning that I won't go into right now. But also, we're concerned about the roads, the wear and tear on the roads, and bridges. So we are set in that the escrow, the surety bond, needs to be $1 million per turbine, up to 10 turbines for safeguarding the roads, and $500,000 for the bridges, which might not be enough by the time they if there comes to decommissioning them in 20 years. Who knows what that will be. I would advise you to look up Mark Mills. He's under PragerU. He has a 5-minute documentary, just short, he's concise, about wind industry and solar industry, what are the pros and cons about it, and also Mark Schellenberger. He has TED Talks about it. He says, I was a lucky kid. I was born to some hippies. So when the green train came, I was on it. But as a scientist that he is, after he investigated it, he is no longer recommends any industrial wind complexes or solar, that they're detrimental to the earth. They do not supply any, all the money that is invested will not return. Also, I am sure you understand that most of these subsidies are going to foreign countries. And in Holt County, Nebraska, before they switched the turbines on, that company changed hands 3 times. 1/4 of the companies that invest in turbines switch hands because they're go broke. So as a good neighbor, we want only the best for our communities, and I am not a resident of your fine county, but best to you.
Thank you. I see familiar faces in here, and I'm waiting for them to get up and say something to me. Other than Mr. Marks.
I'm Grady Marks, Sioux City, Woodbury County rural resident, farm owner. And I'm with Tom on the same, we're not here to argue, we can't stop the turbines, we're not big enough. But we need the protection of the roads and infrastructures and all that's been said. And the Les Hills tie, I'm afraid of, if it goes through now, it may be a mask to say they're going to protect the wind farm energy. But 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, or however many years down the road, that overlay, if you want to use that word, may not be the right word, but the district could affect other things other than turbines. It could affect a farmer for putting in a septic system or digging some wells because his wells went. That Les Hills language is, I'm not against Les Hills. I think parks and stuff are great. But that language, I think, is dangerous down the road. So we need to not let the Les Hills get their toe in the door, but still have the conservation that they want, but not let them tell us as landowners what we can and cannot do with their land. That's a property rights issue, and I don't know, I can say a lot more, but I agree with that lady very much on the depth. 4 foot isn't enough depth, and I like this lady with 8 foot in Nebraska. I think those things should be considered because, that word sterile farm environment, with that turbine's gone and that company's broke, you've got farm ground that could be useless. So, but that's a different issue. But I think the Les Hills language should be completely eliminated from this whole discussion.
Thank you. This is not directed at you personally, but can we try and keep it to about 3 minutes?
Absolutely. Eric Nelson, 1514 Jasper Avenue at Mobile. I'm opposed to wind energy, all right? But this discussion isn't a thumbs up or a thumbs down on that. What I'm really here to point out, and I spent a couple hours this morning catching up on past meetings, and I was, I guess, disappointed is a fair word. The definition of a stakeholder is a person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business. And I still haven't seen a list of who the stakeholders were. I've heard them talked about. Is there someone here that has a list of who the stakeholders were that were appointed? Because it appears that there weren't any landowners in Woodbury County that were appointed as stakeholders in this project. And consequently, I'm wondering how much different would this ordinance look already that we're debating if there had been representation. Mr. Marks just referred to that himself, and I guess we have to come and take up our space, but there were non-tax-paying organizations that were allowed in, non-government entities as stakeholders in this discussion, when everywhere you're looking from east and south and north of here are tax-paying, land-owning business operators that were not allowed in on this, this list of stakeholders. So I actually think that a lot of what we're looking at today is flawed because it wasn't promulgated from a cross-section of people throughout the county. And in my mind, I'm questioning what it would actually look like had there been, all right? And so, and given that there isn't a project that's imminent, and I don't believe that it is, I think that the really good wind statistic areas are being developed now, and I don't believe that Woodbury County's in that. So I would suggest that maybe you, it's been somewhat contentious. I think it has been because some stakeholders were left out at the table to come up with the proposal. So maybe step back and take a look at doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any input before we close the public hearing?
I'll tell you, for me, I haven't really, I kind of had in my mind made up what I was going to do today before coming to the meeting, and nothing's really changed it because a lot of these arguments I've heard all week long. So I'm really glad to have heard so much over the last week. This is kind of the process you're really supposed to follow. Anyhow, that's the whole purpose of having the 3 public hearings and 3 readings, and this way you get all that feedback. And the changes that were made last week, I think, spurred a lot of the comments and discussion that came to us over the last week. So I guess I just want to thank people for being involved and commenting and showing up and sending emails, phone calls, whatever else I've gotten. So.
Last chance for the public to come up and speak.
Mark Nelson, 3773 180th Street, Correctionville. I live just about a mile and a half west of the Little Sioux Valley, right in the hills. Unfortunately, they're not part of that map, but I think they're just as pretty and they should be in there. But this young lady said a lot of really great things about the people that have to live in those areas. Our original farm is up in Marcus, Iowa, where they are just working on a wind farm to the west and completed a wind farm about 3 miles north of our farm now, and so we get to see those things from where we live. And the work and destruction that was done in that area to get those things built and the funds that Cherokee County sunk into those areas, you've seen get sucked out of the other parts of the county where those turbines weren't there. I mean, they put so much money in the roads and so much money into tax breaks for these guys up there, and then the southern part, the roads have just gone to hell, and they just don't have the funds. And so I know this isn't an up or down vote today on turbines, but as a county, we really need to be cognizant of who these turbines are going to affect, and that's what I thought her talk was so great, was we are the ones out in the eastern part of the county that will be affected the most, and I just would hate to, that we don't get a seat at the table to really talk about that. And as far as this other lady back here on the setbacks, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the things are loud. I've talked to Keith this week. I got friends with livestock that those things, the blades will shuck ice and they'll kill livestock. And the problem is the evidence melts. Once it gets warm enough and it just becomes an insurance charade. The noise is terrible. I got friends over by Storm Lake, and I mean, you learn to live with it, I guess. But what kind of quality of life is that? And so I really implore you guys to really take this very seriously. And I wish that we could be a part of this process. And I agree with Eric that it's not something that has to be done today. And so maybe we need to kick the can down and come up with something that's really, really good. But that's just my opinion, and I wanted to say my piece today. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Kathy, you're not usually this quiet.
I know, but I'm just here to listen.
If no one else is going to speak, I'm going to move to close the public hearing, so last chance.
We get to speak?
We will, but
Okay.
is that on the public hearing part?
I'll second.
No. All right.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Public hearing is closed, 5-0. Mr. Monson, do you have something?
I do. Grady, I got a text from you. It said, "Hi, this is Grady. Call me." I get 5 or 10 of those a week. Scammers, hackers.
I'm not a scammer.
No, but you didn't identify yourself. So that's why I didn't call you back.
Do you know more than one Grady?
I get emails from people, I have no idea who they are. So, Les Hills Alliance. I was on the Les Hills Alliance for 12 years. I've been off for 5 years. I'm back on. I have not been to a meeting. August is the next one. The Les Hills has 3 main committees. Economic Development, which is to improve the economy of the hills. Protection and Stewardship. They spend a lot of time doing cedar burns to save the hills, helping people understand the best way to promote what grows best on Les soil. I got a copy of an email. Unfortunately, it was from Grady. I got to put my glasses on. As we proved in the past, the Les Hills Alliance is trying to do another land grab. We got it removed from their last attempt. As Woodbury County landowners, we can't be overburdened with the hidden agendas of the people like the Les Hills Society. There is nobody on that Les Hills Alliance that has any interest in taking anybody's land. There are a bunch of supervisors from Fremont County up through Plymouth County, and they all have the same interests that you folks do. You can't do this to me as a landowner, but I do want to preserve the land. And you know what? I'm embarrassed that we are saying they are land grabbers and hidden agendas. There's nothing hidden. There's no land grabbers. Guess who the chair of the Les Hills Alliance is? Don Snyder, for God's sakes. The best conservationists we've had in this county or the state or the region. I'm embarrassed to say that she's being called a land grabber, for God's sakes. Somebody ought to apologize to her because I don't think they knew. It's very unfortunate that we've moved this concept of the Les Hills as a negative item. It's not negative. It's positive. Hey, you want to go down to Council Bluffs and see some really nice work? Some guy, before they stopped him, dug a big hole, huge hole, in the hills. Finally got him stopped. Google had hundreds of millions of tons of earth purchased out of the hills to build their neat little thing down there until somebody caught on and stopped it. That had been a hole all the way through the hills. We don't need that stuff. Those are the kinds of things the Les Hills Alliance is trying to work with, trying to create the grasses and the wildlife that are habitat within that region. There's nobody on that. One of you folks need to get on the Les Hills Alliance board and meet the folks that are on there. They're not bad people. They're not trying to take anybody's land. So why don't we remove from all of the county documents a map of the county? So we could say, oh, over by this corner, then you can go over here, and then, yeah. The Les Hills is a thing. You can't remove it. It's there. And it's an international treasure. It's a big deal. So we have to make sure we don't mess it up. And on the other hand, let people do what they do in the hills. This is kind of disappointing to me that we're back in this conversation. The Les Hills should not be the conversation. The Les Hills is not going to take away anything from you. And, you know, Tom tried to explain to me what rights he would lose by having a designation of the Les Hills. There isn't anything you lose. Nothing. It's an item. It's like saying the Floyd Monument, it's there. You don't lose any rights because of the Floyd Monument. It's a piece of ground that has a designation, and with it, I don't think there's a whole lot of legalities that prevent you or allow you to do anything other than what you do. I'm done.
Mr. Radig?
Mr. Chairperson, this board operates pretty informally most of the time, but in order to stick with the agenda and be transparent. At this time, there should be a motion in front of you to consider and deliberate on.
Okay.
I'll move the third reading, and then we take out the Les Hills wording.
I will second that. Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt.
So just everybody's clear, is the ordinance that you're considering at this point, the third reading of this ordinance does not include a reference to Lowe's Hills.
Correct. Mr. Raddick, do you have anything?
I think the 1250 setback is a good compromise. Obviously, just a 1 mile if you go to the 1 mile, it looks kind of like the flag of the Congo. 1250 still gives some space for development if somebody so chooses to on their property.
1250 from what?
The setback requirement.
Which is
I'm just saying on the maps here.
from the Les Hills?
No, just from what we discussed earlier. I think that number is good. I agree with what Tom said and with, what a few others had said, that at the end of the day, we can determine what we feel is the Les Hill boundary by approving up or down on an individual windmill that comes before the Board of Supervisors. So
You done?
that's
right.
Let's take 2 weeks and get some more people into the room so that more folks from unincorporated Woodbury County feel like they've been heard. Let's take 2 weeks. David, would 2 weeks give us enough time to get everybody back together to put some more people in the room, so people that are going to be correctly impacted by a windmill going up in their neighborhood or feel like they're being heard?
Would that make it a fourth reading?
No, you're just deferring.
Well, I'm not.
We wouldn't be able to adequately notice the public hearing because of the way.
Mr. Gleiser.
Supervisor Wright, if you're asking for a fourth public hearing for next Tuesday, I don't think that I could logistically get that done with the Sioux City Journal, with the public notice. To the comments about the different stakeholder groups, we worked on this for over a year, and one of the things that we did to get rural and agricultural stakeholder input is we worked with the Siouxland Initiative and the Siouxland Chamber, and they have an ag committee with members of all different facets of the agricultural industry. And we actually did a workshop with them. I think there were about 30 people in the room. I can't remember the titles of the organizations or the companies that were in the room, but I can promise you that we did get feedback and input and stakeholders in the room who live in these areas and who work in the agricultural industry, as well as with those individuals who work in the renewables industry. It was an event co-facilitated with Power Up Iowa and some of the staff of Governor Reynolds' office. And we did that just within this last 12 months.
We're talking about infrastructure that, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about impacting the visuals for 120,000 people potentially, depending on how many. So I don't know if there's any support for talking about it for a couple more weeks. If we have to delay it even further than that, what's the rush?
I don't know that we're trying to hinder anybody's input. We do 3 readings for obvious reasons so that the public has some knowledge and some insight and some time to get some input into the rest of the board and so on, but I just question the value of extending it out 2 more weeks.
I've used local news media, written press releases, have made phone calls. We have had numerous public notices, and I feel like we've had adequate public input. mean, it's up to the board. If there's consensus from the board that folks want to direct me to schedule another public hearing, I can do that. It wouldn't be my recommendation that we need another one if that's.
My thoughts are in a way behind to be controlled the process. Just express that in this meeting, and if there's more out there that feel the same way, let's address that before we make such a huge decision. This is a huge decision.
Well, in some ways, you can always change the ordinance, though, too, after it's adopted. I mean, there's an amendment process. He goes to the board again. Personally, I don't know what's in it that would change my mind afterwards. You know, that's why I feel like we went through the process we went through, and, you know.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of several comments here. I agree with Mr. Monson on the whole, you know, I don't like that it seems like people are being pit against each other, and I'm just not seeing that. In reality, we all seem to agree that we can't stop wind farms, you know, in general, but I don't really buy into the hidden agenda sort of mantra that, you know, I haven't been contacted by alliances that want to do different things and are talking trash about other alliances, you know, I just don't see that. So we realize we can't stop these. In regards to Loess Hills, I do think that if there's a battle between conservation and private property rights, I'm going to err on the side of private property rights. And so that's why I would support the ordinance without that language. I don't generally think that the land is suitable for wind farms. I think we've all agreed on that. I don't think it makes good business sense for a company to build on that kind of soil for obvious reasons. And so I don't really see the concern, and obviously no one's done it yet, and they could have. The last thing is, the first speaker made a reference to the fact that your proposal, David, puts the decision-making power in the hands of the board. 4 of us definitely live in incorporated, you know, Sioux City area, and you know, people on the zoning and Board of Adjustment may be more balanced as far as where they live in rural areas, which is true. However, I'm confused because, and I don't know who this question is for, but at least the individuals on these commissions and this board and this commission said they support the ordinance you provided, which does take power away from them and give it to the Board of Supervisors for the reasoning of this being a very public and far-reaching thing that needs this sort of public input, and the board meetings get a higher level of public involvement typically. So I guess my question is, why are they in favor of giving up that power to the Board of Supervisors? Because I don't want it to seem like the Board of Supervisors is, quote, taking a power grab when the people that are giving us the power wanted to give us the power. They're on paper saying they want to give us that power. So I don't know if that question's for you based on your conversations with those groups.
We had meetings with the Zoning Commission and the Board of Adjustment. We made it abundantly clear that there are multiple ways that this can be done. It can be, we could choose to make this an outrighted, permitted, allowed use in certain zoning districts, just like other allowed structures. So if that happens, people don't have to bother with any zoning commission or supervisors or Board of Adjustments. They just come to my office. If it meets the setbacks or the requirements, then we issue them a permit administratively. The other option was to do through a conditional use permit. Zoning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. And the other one is the standalone standalone ordinance, which Iowa code allows, and it was initially thought of by the work group to suggest this structure because of the fact that we've seen the supervisors in the situation numerous times where you have hog confinements siting in your county and you have no ability to do anything about it. Well, we thought that because of this code provision, it gives you supervisors the ability to get out of the zoning ordinance and affect your own ordinance and develop your own criteria. It's, you know, just because you don't live out there doesn't mean that you're not qualified to make decisions. You were elected to represent those parts of the county. And I guess, other than to say that they had discussions about liking the thought of maybe using those bodies as a recommending body or a sounding body, you know, like, hey, why don't you let us vet them or do what we do and then give the recommendations to the board. Unfortunately, because of the provisions of the code, we're not able to make reference to zoning and zoning districts and land use, and so we can't use those folks. And I think what has happened is those folks, those boards and bodies have said, let's go ahead and give that power to the board. So I came and initiated that process. I initiated that process with the Board of Supervisors, and there have been changes and revisions that have been discussed in public meetings during these public hearings, and I think that they've felt like this should have been sent back for further discussion and additional recommendation. I've explained that that's not logistically how it happens when we're in a public hearing. You would have to come either as an individual, or it'd have to be something that would be voted upon and published on the agenda and voted on. And so I think some of the members have had a change of heart. I am confused with what some of these members want. I thought that I understood they don't want the Lost Hills language in there. And so that's why I've made the concession in the recommendation to please adopt a standalone ordinance with all the staff recommendations that have been presented today. And if it could save this, I can live without the language in the Lost Hills, because I don't think they're going to go there.
Right.
But it doesn't do anything for those that feel that those protections should be there, or that the 5 county supervisors that are sitting here today that say, we would never cite one of those in that area. I don't know, maybe Justin or Matthew decides to not run your next term, and the next person in your chair says, I'll cite them. So that's the conflict, you know. But I can say with some comfort that my original proposal did not include that language for a reason. And I think that the additional revisions and changes that have been added have made it better. And so I firmly support the standalone format. We shot all the holes in our local zoning ordinance of why we want to do it this way. And that's the best way I can answer that. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, appreciate the clarification, because, you know, we are listening to these opinions here, and this is, I don't think this has been a failure of the process. We've certainly heard from people and incorporated suggestions, and in this case, potentially adjusted those, so.
I know we've ruffled some feathers, and some stakeholders may have felt left out or unincluded. It's unintentional, and I've tried to do the best that I can to cast a widest net as possible and work with as diverse body as possible. And to be honest with you, most of this work happened during the pandemic and during the quarantine. And so there wasn't a lot of ability to get folks together in rooms and et cetera, so.
You look like somebody beat you up, David.
No, sir, I enjoy every minute of it.
Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Gleiser?
I don't know, but all this talk is making me hungry for some steak.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Up.
You got to come up.
You said you talked to some stakeholders from the unincorporated areas that were on the chamber ag committee. Do any of those people live in unincorporated parts of the county?
I mentioned it earlier, I can't, off of memory, tell you the individuals or the organizations that they represent or where they live, but, you know, it's about 30 bodies in the room that are supposed to be representing segments of the agricultural industry in the Siouxland region. I can get those names and addresses, and I can get the attendance list if you'd like.
Because I guess I'm involved in two of the biggest ag organizations in the county, and I'm unaware of anyone that's on that committee. So that's what makes me question, like, how unincorporated, or where these people live that were on this committee, as far as their input, because I'm sitting back here with a lot of other people involved in the county, and we're like, who are these people? Because that's no one that I can't think of anyone off the top of my head.
I could try to find out, and if you would like that information, I can get it to you.
That'd be great.
Sure.
Back up here, please.
So, Mr. Gleiser, you mentioned communicating with the constituents, or I should say the stakeholders in unincorporated Woodbury County. We have our own paper in Danbury called the Danbury Review. Did you ever post anything in it?
Yeah, we sent out a notice to all of our rural papers. Whether or not they choose to publish it is not my call.
So Mapleton, Millville, everybody got?
Well, we wouldn't necessarily send to Mapleton, that's not in our county.
We sent it to the Mobile Record,
Wait,
the
you're gonna have-
Advocate, or to the Record, to the Advocate.
The Review.
To
Danbury Review.
And
Danbury.
Review.
I know this is Tom Ryder, 1505 Buchanan Avenue. I know this is getting to be long. Mr. Ung's question, when he talked about the zoning commission giving up that right, I think part of the fact that the person that was just up here was speaking about is with the zoning board and the Board of Adjustment, they feel that they're a little closer connected to them, and they make them aware of what's going on better. That's part of the reason on this particular issue, I did not have an issue with you guys taking over to vote on it, because a $200, $300 million project isn't going to sneak into Woodbury County. So I think that there's going to be pretty good public comments from all sides to be able to let you know what they want. And that's the reason why I was okay with the standalone ordinance prior to the Los Hills language addition.
Thank you.
Like I said it before, I'm opposed to wind farms. I can't stop them, and that's not what the vote is on today. That's where we're at. I am for landowners' rights, and I'm not speaking for Mr. Marks. Maybe he was misdirecting his words, but I don't know that we're concerned about, or I'm not concerned about the Les Hills grabbing land. But I am concerned about landowners losing their rights to other organizations. Yeah, I'm in favor of the Les Hills too, but I don't want to see our landowners in this county lose the rights to their land. I don't want to make things so restrictive that if they want to put up an individual turbine for their own use or whatever the case may be, I don't want to have the setbacks so ridiculous that they can't do that. But like I said, if someone wants to do that, that's their land, that's their right. So that's where I'm at. And I would like a roll call vote, please. Yes, they are.
Joshua wanted to weigh in.
His microphone is still off.
It's off.
Monson.
No.
Raddick.
Aye.
Wright. Ung.
Aye.
DeWitt.
Aye. Passes 4-1 with Mr. Monson opposed. I believe we have an ordinance.
Yes, that was to approve the third reading. So it was without the Los Hills reference. What was the setback?
It stayed the same, the 1250.
1250.
So it'd be as presented by David tonight.
Right.
So it would, that motion would include all revisions as proposed, and then exclude or delete any reference from Les Hills from the ordinance.
But just to be clear, it was 1250, correct?
Yeah.
1,250 feet, yes, for occupied residence setback.
Okay.
It's this one from the packet, right? The Les Hills language.
Speaking for the board, which is kind of my job this year, but thank you all for your input. I truly appreciate it. I know that there's some, as Mr. Gleiser said, some ruffled feathers. There's some things that I just don't like about it. There's some other things that I'll stand by forever. So thanks again for everybody involved. We have one item left, and that is...
Nope. You're going to move the ordinance.
Oh.
Or was it just the third reading?
No, it's third reading.
That was just the third reading. They have to move the ordinance at this point.
I will move approval of the ordinance.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. Thank you for that catch. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Passes 4-1. Mr. Monson opposed. Thanks again. Item 10, Supervisor Monson and the Budget Finance Director, approval of Woodbury County nonprofit funding request from Lamb Arts Limited.
I believe we asked them to come back with explanations on why they needed a match. Is that not what we asked?
I believe.
Sorry.
I think that, yeah, you'll find that why we need the matches, one of them is the Enhance Iowa. Yeah, Enhance Iowa Foundation does need a grant. I mean, there has to be a match from city and from county for that.
Is it an and or an or?
It's an and. Yeah, that one is an and. Because Potawatomi County, with their new Hoff Family Center, got approval, and they needed to get approval for their Enhance Iowa from both their county and their city.
In this document, it does say or.
It does say or, okay. Well, they were going with the and.
And you have matching, you have funding matching.
Oh, we would. We're working on the city right now. Yeah. No, we're working on a lot of different things with them, with economic development, and what else? There's a couple other, remedial. We have the EPA.
Yeah, we discussed the EPA funds.
Did you not get the building from the city?
Oh, yes.
So they're in this.
The city's heavily invested in
Right.
it already.
Yeah.
And
But they'll be,
Yeah.
and we're hoping they'll forgive it.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, in addition.
But there was precedence, that was the one big thing that I know that Josh was wondering about was,
You have the name of somebody that you've been working with the Enhance Iowa?
well, it's part of, actually with our developer, Julie Stanviak.
But she's the developer, she's
Yeah.
not the contact with the Enhance Iowa program?
And I do have a contact in my phone. I could, should I get it?
I'll get it from you.
Okay.
It's Debbie Durham's department, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Debbie Durham's.
And she's the one
It's
that,
economic development for the state.
Okay.
we've been working with Debbie for the last several years, just on anything that's
She took one of the
available.
first tours in the building. She's a very, very supportive of the project.
So the requested amount has remained $1 million.
Well, yes, I mean, when she was, you don't write a request for 100.
Hey.
You know, I wasn't born yesterday.
Gotcha.
Don't giggle too much. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing. You're not funding an arts program. It's,
On the very first page.
yeah, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, job creation and the rehabilitation of a blighted building and lots of other stuff.
Are your construction costs ballooning?
No, as a matter of fact, we met with our developer just last week, and as you well know, construction costs, as we talk, we're still in the process. It's a couple of years yet before fruition. If we were indeed in the middle of building, yes.
You'd be in trouble, yeah. I
They
mean,
just
there'd
had
be
a
a lot.
project of theirs that went over $3 million. But you've read the stuff just like I have. I mean, I build sets, and so I know lumber. But you've read too that it's starting to come down, So by the time that we are shovels, we should still be okay. We still have plenty of money to raise, and that's why we need your help.
Because a lot of it is going to be the perception too. If the county is in support of this project, it's really going to spur other funding sources.
Have you got Brad Pitt booked yet?
Not yet, I'm working on him.
About Lori Petty,
Or Laura, yeah,
1 out of 10 girl?
yeah.
Show.
Okay, Justin, shoot. We haven't talked, so I don't know what you're going to say.
So back to the question of the and versus or city and county. So do we have a definitive answer on that?
Well, and if it is in the actual Enhance Iowa thing, it does says and/or. However, it was in Pottawatomie County for sure. I know it was and other places too. And before I even looked at the contract, they were always saying, you need to have county support, you need to have city support. We need to know that your population is really in favor of this particular project. And, yeah.
In one of the very first meetings we had with Ms. Debbie Durham, I remember her saying that. As you move along, you will have to go to the Board of Supervisors and get their support. So I don't know about the semantics of Supervisor but this is what we've been from the time we started this. From the time the city called us and said, hey, you want to do this?
And so all along, we've been thinking we've got to talk to you guys to find out. Because that's what we heard from Debbie.
Debbie is definitely an and.
Yeah, she's an and, yeah.
Well, and I think, in general, the language can say one thing, but the people that decide probably get multiple applications because they only get $5 million a year to even hand out.
Right.
Yeah.
And most projects are lucky to even get, 700,000, let alone $1 million, which is usually what they put as their max grant. So.
Well, and another example of that is that they say you need to be at 75%.
Instead of 65.
When they say that like this, so don't expect any money until you're 75% there. But it's written down totally differently.
Yeah, it's written that it says 65.
Yeah,
but.
so it isn't.
So we are tap dancing as fast as we can, gentlemen. We are.
So again, personally, nothing's really changed for me from 2 weeks ago or the 2 weeks before that, is that I don't know where we're at funding the jail. I'm totally willing to do a letter support at this time. I'm not willing to still do anything financial because, I don't know if we're going to be able to use COVID funds for a jail. I have no verification of that. And as far as I'm concerned, I have proposed 0 things to the Board of Supervisors because, I don't know where we sit financially. So personally, if we have to vote on it today, I'm going to vote no. But I'd be willing to do a letter of intent to support at some point, knowing, I don't know how long it's going to take to find out from Treasury on where we stand, but
Well, if we can't use COVID funds, the little bit of money we're gonna talk about here certainly gonna make a difference. We're gonna need a lot of money.
Well, how much is a little money, Mark? How much are you thinking?
I'd do 50,000 over 3 years each. Unless Jason's got a better idea.
Jason?
Justin?
Justin, sorry.
Sorry, no.
Or was it Grady? I
I'm
forgot.
I'm having a hard time making a decision because I see a lot of value in the project, because I see it as you do, as potential economic development. I think if that project gets done, that's a big domino that could fall, and perhaps a couple other people with ideas could come forward. But, you know, that's a big building. It would be a draw on Thursday, Friday, Saturday
Oh, yeah.
nights, and but I'm also concerned with the recent decision at the state level about funding nonprofits. I don't know, and Josh was weighed in a couple times. I don't know that they would not come back and ask us for that money back at this point. And I would want to be a lot more secure on that point before voting yes on a financial.
Joshua, did you find anything out?
Well, as far as a conclusive answer, I think it's still a little bit of a gray area. I mean, we have the guidance from the state auditor and his feelings on it. We don't have court opinions on it that would provide more certainty. I think there are certain categories that I could definitively say, no, that wouldn't be an appropriate gift. If it's just if it's a nonprofit and it's for operating budget, basically a gift, no strings attached, it's clear to say that's not something the board should be doing. A project like this where there's an economic development portion that's being put forward, I can see that argument. Economic development is something that the board can do. It's just a matter of the board making those factual findings and, you know, arguing their case, kind of like what they're doing for using the COVID money for the jail funds. There's sometimes uncertainty, and that's why the board makes the decision on that. I will say, in regards to the Enhance Iowa, as we were sitting here, or as you all were talking, I was trying to find the actual regulation on it, and I couldn't find that, but I did find a frequently asked questions document from the Iowa Economic Development Association or Authority website. And in regards to the matches, it does say that there's a cash, the EI board requires cash contributions from the city and the county in which the project will be located. So at least on their FAQ as of May 8th of 2019, that's the position they were taking. So, and I would imagine that there's the regulation that they're operating under supports that assertion. If that's the case, then I don't think that it's something that the state auditor could say is an inappropriate expenditure if it's specifically authorized by that regulation. So,
when do you need to know by?
Well,
I hate you.
you know,
Just have them coming back every 2 weeks.
Well,
you
no,
know-
that's what I'm saying.
No, but you know, but Keith, you know, that's a good question. You were talking about a letter, and maybe a letter saying that you support the project and funding would be determined at a later date. That would be something that would satisfy it for right now. And then, once you guys know what you're doing with the jail, because I know how hard it is. We've been balancing things like this forever, so I know how hard it is. I have a lot of, my heart goes out to you for all the stuff that you're trying to do with the county. But a letter would be very helpful at this point, because it's something that we can show the city too, you know, and the amount is yet to be determined. You're looking at me funny, but I would be fine with that.
I always look at her funny.
Sure, I mean, it's kind of like an
It's just-
outside-the-box
Well,
solution,
it's what
temporary
we were
type
just saying,
solution.
And you know, Diana did a tremendous amount of work, I think, because she said you needed more information, and I think she got it for you. And again, we discovered precedent. She found, and it was recent. This theater
It was just before the pandemic.
Yeah, theater dance complex in Council Bluff is very recent, and the Board of Supervisors gave them money for that project.
So we were trying to.
How much?
I don't,
know,
but yeah, we
but-
don't know that amount,
yes.
but I'm sure that she could be contacted.
Yeah, but that Board of Supervisors, what is it, Potawatomi?
Mm-hmm.
Potawatomi gave that, and it wasn't to sustain them for dance shoes. It was to get that building up for the economic
For Council
development,
Bluffs,
for the
yeah.
tourism, for the job creation. That's what's exciting about our project. That's what makes it unique, quite frankly.
How many jobs again are being created? It's in here.
It's in
It's
there.
in, it's on, yeah,
Yeah, not hundreds, of course, but.
no.
Like 5, I think?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
more than
5 or
that.
6.
No, more than that.
Right.
11?
Like full,
Yeah.
full-time?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Well, you
lot.
get something like this, you know, we have people, we have friends all over the country, theater professionals in New York, in Chicago, Denver, that when this gets up,
They'd love to come back home and work.
I
They would
mean,
love to come back.
I work like this with New York playwrights. We've done Stephen Dalganoff's world premieres of 3 of his musicals. So,
I'm not cultured, I don't know who you're talking about,
no,
so.
you wouldn't know his name. No, you wouldn't know his name. But he's a really cool
He's got a
guy.
theater.
In
that does-
Korea.
In Korea that does his stuff, and right next door is a Stephen Dalganoff store, because he's so hot in Korea. Yeah, and we did his first show.
So, again, we want to, I know you're busy.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
taking
yeah.
any more.
I would like to have someone entertain a motion so we can, it's really difficult to sit here and say,
Sure.
no, I'm not gonna give you any money, because I do like what you're doing, but I'm at the point where we've got so much on our plate as a county that.
Absolutely. I think just showing a sign of support, if you'll be willing to do that.
Is
And
that
then-
your motion, Mr. Reddick?
Well, I'm willing to make that motion that I'm willing to financially support, at a later date and determined amount.
So, may I ask what that later date might be? Because obviously,
Fair question.
I honestly,
do you have any ideas?
So we're just talking about the enhanced grant tonight, right?
Yeah.
Are there other grants that you're gonna be?
Oh, she's
Oh,
after
yeah,
all of
oh,
us.
yeah.
So,
She's after
Yeah,
all
and
of us.
looking for matches with regard to all of those?
Oh, there are a couple, and I didn't want to put their names down in there, just because it's just like bad luck. But, that if, by showing city and county support, it all of a sudden just boosts you right to the top. And those are huge.
And so since you're still doing work on it, I don't know that we could set that date.
Well, and I'm not talking about specific.
well, basically, once we gotta know
What the
if
jail's
Treasury's
doing.
gonna
Yeah.
allow us to use COVID relief dollars or not, because if not, the next 2 years are gonna be really lean on this county, like really lean from my perspective. I don't know about it.
So in your motion, do you have a time frame?
No.
I would just interject that because the county typically has fewer ways to raise funds compared to cities that have all these fees and different things like that, we're typically approached as the last resort after the city has been approached and approved some amount. So we have some sort of basis based on unincorporated versus Sioux City proper population, things like that, because, their budget is quite a bit bigger.
Would you be willing to say that it's something that you support what we're doing, the county supports it?
Yes.
So that we bring it to the city and they're going to go, oh, we've got,
Yes.
that would be cool.
So to be revisited after the city makes its decision.
Ooh.
No.
After the what?
I was thinking
Why
a
would
year,
we
to be
revisit?
honest
We
with
gotta
you.
hear from
Then you
Treasury.
get the city people's hackles up, gentlemen, you know that. So,
Uncle Bob and I aren't on the best of terms this week, so.
Yeah.
so, talk about butting heads.
Yeah.
But yes, a letter of support, and I ask about time. I mean, 2 years from now is going to be tough, because.
2 years is too far.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I would say
It's-
1
it's-
year.
How about the first meeting in September?
Yeah.
If we don't know about COVID funds by then, we're in trouble.
We should know by then.
Well, I think we'd know by our budget cycle.
We're supposed to have final rules, I think, adopted by July 15th.
Yeah, but this is the federal government, they're never on time.
You could make it October.
So is that a motion, Mr. Redding?
Yeah.
Would you state it for the record, please?
Letter of financial support to be determined at a later date, I guess.
Is that adequate, Mr. Gill?
Letter of intent to support.
Would you want a date?
It's as adequate as Mr. Raddick wants it to be.
So that would effectually allow you to draft a letter for the chair to sign without coming back.
Oh, okay.
Is that right? Okay.
Right.
All right.
I'm pretty easy to find.
Are you?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And
Thanks, guys.
I do not envy the position you guys are in. I mean, I totally
I'll
get it,
second.
and you guys are,
Sorry.
you know, you're doing something pretty amazing over there, and, you know, I do appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
All those in, go ahead. No, I think you get to a certain length of a meeting and it becomes useless, but
I
do
agree.
you have anything else?
I am done. I was
Okay.
just going to say thank you, but that's all I was going to say.
You're
The
welcome.
bylaws need to say first hour you, second hour me, and we can kind of, get you in your prime, and then
Brevity. I
Yeah.
think Mr. Taylor said
Yeah.
to the effect of brevity is my whatever.
Weakness.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
All right.
Passes
Thank
5
you
to 0.
so much.
We'll be back at the right time.
I bet you will. Reports on committee meetings.
I don't have any reports except congratulations for your new position.
Anybody else? Round 2 of citizen concerns. Board concerns.
City Journal concerns.
We are adjourned.
Don't leave. That's concerning right there.